The first 100,000 changes everything. It is your ticket to financial freedom, but most people never get there. In this video, I'm going to show you my step-by-step playbook to go from 0 to 100,000 much faster than you think and without giving up the life that you love. Let's jump in. As always, I would really appreciate it if you like this video and if you subscribe to my channel, especially if you learn something new. So let's talk about why 100,000 is generally known as the magic number. So 100,000 really is your first taste of financial freedom. I remember when I first got and crashed through this glass ceiling, if you will, of 100,000, it did a couple of things to me. First, it gave me a huge confidence boost. It was like, yes, Fiona, you can actually do this. You can save money and your $1 million, your 2 comma club goal is coming up because you just crashed through the 1 comma club. Literally, it changes your entire view of how you can become a millionaire because you literally have a taste now of that money, of that freedom. It gives you a ton of more options in life. Okay, maybe you have, a vet bill that's quite expensive, or maybe you have a medical bill that's a little expensive too. Okay, maybe that's going to actually cause you to slow down from achieving your $1 million goal, but it does give you more options. You don't have to go into debt, right? Which we obviously want to avoid. There's also no more small decision making money stress. Oftentimes, at least when I started saving for my $100,000 goal and then ultimately to my $1 million goal, I was really worried. I'm like, oh my gosh, should I pay like another $2 extra for guacamole or for latte? Like I used to go to Starbucks actually quite a bit. I do like Starbucks, right? And I cut all of my lattes. I cut my entire Starbucks spending. I was quite sad. I think it made me healthier at some point too. But I didn't do that. I didn't enjoy those small things because I really wanted to focus on hitting my $100,000 goal. Well, when you hit that goal, guess what? You can actually enjoy a couple of these sweet treats, right? Maybe, once every month or so instead of once every day, but you can still enjoy it without having to really be concerned about losing money to those expenses. So another thing I wanted to show you here is this chart. I thought this did a really good job explaining the importance of compounding, right? So compounding your investments versus your salary growth, okay? And the reason why I thought this chart did a really good job is because I want to make sure that it's clear salary growth is not necessarily the one thing you want to focus on to hit your $100,000 marker. Salary growth is good, it's important of course, but it's not really the only thing you should focus on. In fact, what you really should focus on at an early age, and I'm sure you've heard this many times, is compounding investments. And this chart shows that. Right? So it has a couple of lines here. I'm going to zoom in here. We have investment growth, the orange line, which is this. We have new contributions to your investment account, which is blue. So this is just, okay, you put in $15,000 in this year, you put in $20,000 in this year. That's what new contributions means. This is your salary growth. So these are really the two types of lines we're going to be looking at, salary growth and investment growth. And then you have your annual savings rate. So the two lines, again, the orange line we're looking at shows the investment growth. And then we have the red line, which is salary growth. And as you can see, at some point in your life, there will be this inflection. By inflection, I mean, yeah, sure, your salary is probably going to be hopefully higher than when you start with your investing, right? When you start with your investing, you're probably going to be looking at, maybe $0 or $100 or something like this. According to this chart, you're looking at roughly $500 when you start your investing. Your salary is hopefully more than $500 a year. But here you start with, 50,000, let's call this. This here's your salary. But generally speaking, there's this spread. This spread is this gap between your salary, which is your red line, and then you have your investing, which is your orange line. There's a pretty big spread, right? Your salary is typically much higher than where you start investing. But if you're consistent over time, at some point there will be this inflection where, thanks to compounding interest, that salary growth will actually flatline, right? So this red is kind of flat, but your investment growth due to compounding keeps going up. So at this inflection point, you are actually making more money with investment compounding growth. And that is why you want to really start focusing on compounding investments. Yeah, of course you want to always build skills. You always want to build and, get more money, increase your revenue. However, the important thing in the long run is going to be this compounding growth. And it's going to take off much faster than you think in the long run. So the biggest myth that keeps people stuck, especially from achieving their $100,000 goal, is this here. And I've seen this even with my clients when I was working with them. High income does not equal wealth. Let me actually tell you a quick story before I keep going here. I had a client, he was an attorney, and he owned his own law practice, okay? Very, very well-known law practice. And he was making about $1 million a year, okay? So $1 million a year is generally quite a bit of money to the normal person, right? To most people, it's a lot of money, $1 million. So he was making $1 million a year in take-home pay. The thing though, so this is high income, right? So I would equate $1 million with high income. But the wealth, he did not really have any wealth. And the reason why is because they spent it, right? So their income was $1 million, but their expenses, he had a spouse, a partner, and the partner also enjoyed spending a lot of money, and the attorney did as well, didn't really push back on those spending habits. And their expenses were about $950K, right? So if their take home, this is after tax too, I should say, if their take home is $1 million, then their spending is $950,000, well, their savings are $50,000. So, over their lifetime, they were not in a really good position to retire. The reason why is because of something called lifestyle creep, because they were used to this almost $1 million lifestyle while saving $50,000, starting at like age 55, which is actually when they started saving the $50,000, is not really a good start. So they had to work through a lot of psychological issues actually together in order to start figuring out, okay, what is actually their retirement annual spending amount, because they could not afford this $950,000 lifestyle. I mean, in my mind, how do you even spend $950,000? I'm sure there's many ways you can get creative, but I think it's very difficult too, right? And so they had to come up with a couple of ways to cut back on some unnecessary expenses. And so as you can see, income really does not equal wealth. They had, I think, like $200,000 saved when I was working with them. And they were in their early 60s. So, you can achieve that without $1 million salary too. So just make sure you keep in mind, it all depends on how much you save, not how much you make. I thought this image was pretty interesting too. This here shows where, someone's making about $12,000 a month, $144,000 a year, and plus another $2,300 401k match per year. So this here's per annum per year. This here's per month. And so it kind of shows visually where all of the money is going. Taxes are about $3,000 per paycheck, right? So this is monthly. This here, so $3,000 goes out to the paycheck. They contribute to their health savings account. If you are curious about health savings account and their triple tax benefit, make sure you check out my other video on that. And then, employee stock purchase plan, this here tells me that it's probably something like a larger company, maybe a tech company, something like that, where they have employee stock options. Income, you can see, okay, so they put a lot of money into savings. They have a Roth 401k, that's actually pretty good. They contribute $5,000 a month, which is a lot of money because your 401k only allows $23,500 per year if you're under 50. So that's actually a lot of money for one paycheck, but to each their own. Okay, so we got that, and then they have an after-tax 401k plan too. Oh, that's good. So an after-tax 401k plan, it essentially allows you to contribute even more than a Roth 401k plan. After tax is like a mega backdoor Roth 401k plan. There's more info on that in my previous videos. Long story short, they're putting almost 50% of their earnings of their total $12,000 earnings into savings, which is fantastic, plus this employee stock purchase plan. So they really are doing a fantastic job. And then out of these expenses, so this year actually looks like this year's real expenses, you know, there's take-home pay, so they're actually taking home $4,000 a month. Of that, they have, what do they have? $3,100 for rent and parking and utility, okay? And then the remainder, $3,100, so the $700, I guess that is the remainder. $300 a month in food, that seems low, but okay. Pet supplies is like a third of the food cost. That's interesting. Power, car insurance, gasoline, internet, and all the rest. Okay, so as you can see, this person is putting a huge chunk of their monthly earnings into savings, which is exactly what you need to do if you want to hit your 100K goal faster. And ultimately your $1 million goal if you want to join the 2 Comma Club. So this here is a fantastic visual of how some of those savings and how the money transfer and money flow can be actually thought through. And here you can see they put in a lot of money into savings. So overall, earning more does not mean you're increasing your wealth. It does not mean that. Again, income does not equal wealth. Lifestyle creep kills progress. So again, going back to this attorney, because of this thing called lifestyle creep, that he was making $1 million a year, but he was spending $950,000 too. So that means lifestyle creep, and it really does eat into your $100,000 goal. So you want to spend on what you love, of course, but also make sure you cut on what you don't love, right? So if you spend on what you love, make sure it's also not like you love buying a yacht for $40 million that you don't have. That's not what I mean. What you love, I mean, like if you really love guacamole and lattes, go for it, do it. But then also cut out like, you know, going out to eat or going to the club or stuff like that. It's always a balance, right? It's always a balance. And then finally, before we move to the next section, I wanted to share this chart. I thought this did a good job of spending change versus income change. In other words, this chart is showing lifestyle creep, right? So that's really what this chart is showing. And I wanted to show this, like as your income increases, how does your spending increase, if at all? So let's take a look at the couple of data points here in this chart. We have this green dot, which says no lifestyle creep, regardless of the income bracket, right? So we see the income here on the x-axis. We got an income change of $0. So if your income changes with $0, meaning it doesn't change, you're probably going to stay the same, right, in terms of spending, which you can see that there's a lot more green dots in this area because your income doesn't change significantly. If your income changes by $50,000, like you increase your income, your revenue by $50,000, generally speaking, people tend to change and kind of like buy a nicer car, move to a fancier place, buy a nice house, go to a vacation, etc. But so you can see the dots here are more sparse, more thin. And then if your income increases by 100K, there's like 2 data points. Those people keep the lifestyle the same. Everyone else is like severely increasing. Then you can see the black dot here, some lifestyle creep, which isn't bad, right? You're still saving, but you're also enjoying a little bit more of the luxuries. And then severe lifestyle creep or serious lifestyle creep are these red dots. And again, it makes a lot of sense that these red dots are a little bit more dispersed. So you can see that the bell, or like it's not a bell shape, but like the distribution is like really high and then really high and then low. So like the distribution for the serious lifestyle creep is very high amount of people, like a lot of red dots when the income change. So I'm just going to say the income delta here. The income delta is just a little bit. So there's a lot of people that increase a serious lifestyle creep with a little amount of money. And the reason is probably their income amount, like their income level, is probably much lower. So I would assume that they're like, maybe $30,000 or something like that. So if you make $30,000 a year, $25,000 a year, and you get an increase of even just $10,000, that's like 33% of your total income. That's a lot, right? The increase itself compared to how much you were making at the time is a lot. So people generally tend to spend a lot more versus if you make $10,000 more on a $100,000 income, that's just a 10% increase. I mean, it's a lot, but it's not as substantial as a 33% increase on a $30,000 salary, right? So, or 33% of your income. So it's, 10% versus 33%. There's a huge difference there. So I can see that people generally tend to spend more if they make maybe less and their income increases by a pretty large amount percentage-wise compared to their income. And then also if you're making like $100,000 more in a new job, then yeah, people might also kind of up their spending. So I just want to take a quick pause here. I thought this chart was super interesting. If you learned something new, please make sure you subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. And also if you like this video, I would love it. Thank you so much. All right, let's keep moving. The math behind the 100,000. So the first 100,000 really is the hardest, but like I said before, compounding is your invisible teammate that literally works 24/7. It is always happening. Also, very quick point, if you have heard of my book, it's called Zero to Rich. I also talk about some of these strategies I go over in this video. It is one of the top sellers. So would love it if you check it out. All right, so let's keep moving. Saving the first 100,000, I thought this chart was interesting because it shows oftentimes the number of years it takes to save your first 100,000 is generally the longest amount of time compared to your next 100,000 and so on. So oftentimes it takes between 7 to 8 years. So according to this chart, we're looking at 7.84 years. So closer to 8 years. It takes 8 years of consistent saving and investing, of course, and compound growth to grow your wealth to your first $100,000. That's what this chart shows by saving 10% annually at a 7% interest rate. 7% I think is relatively conservative because most of the time the S&P 500 over the last 50 years has grown by about 9 to 10% per year. So I think 7% is a relatively okay number. 10,000 means you're saving less than $1,000 a month. So could also be doable. Saving your first $200,000 on the other hand, like I said before, this is the longest time. Your first 100,000 really is the hardest, as I said up here. It really is the hardest, especially in terms of time. It will also take the longest, again, because of compounding. Here, we're looking at 8 years roughly. The next 100,000, which we're looking here, to get to 200,000 takes 5 years roughly. Again, with the same assumptions, $10,000 annually, 7% interest rate. The next $100,000 after that is 4 years roughly, then 3 years, then 2.5 years. You're getting the point, right? Like it essentially takes really, really long to get your first 100,000. Then you smash through that glass ceiling, and then the next couple of years, it just is less and less and less. So then to get to your first $1 million, I don't know the exact number, at least not on this chart, but the chances are to get you to your first $1 million, it's gonna be less than 2.5 years, which according to this chart is the difference between going from 400,000 to 500,000, right? So to go from 1 million to go to $1 million at this rate, it's going to take you less than 2.5 years. So that is the power of compounding interest. So the next thing I wanted to show you is this chart, the number of years to save each additional $100,000 by saving $10,000 annually. So now there's a couple of things going on in this chart. First, we have annual interest rates. So this is where you can kind of change your assumptions. Like for example, if you said Fiona, 7% is like a little bit conservative, let's bump it up, let's be a little bit more aggressive. Let's look at 9% return. Okay, so if you wanna look at a 9% return in the stock market, and let's say you save 10,000 annually, and your goal is to get to 100,000 in your net worth. So we're looking at this first or second row, I guess, here. You can see to get to your first 100,000 at a 9% interest rate, it'll take 7.45 years versus the 7.84 that we calculated with the 7% interest rate. So at 9% interest to get to your first $1 million, so we're going down this line, this column here, then to get to your $1 million mark at a 9% interest rate, it's going to take 1.09 years. So this is after, right? So we would have to add 7.45, 4.5, 3.23, you would be adding all of this because this chart is number of years to save each additional 100K, right? So you would have to add up all of this and you would get the actual answer of how long, in theory, it would take you to get to your $1 million marker with a 9% interest rate. annual interest rate, which we also know is not always true, right? Because we'll have good years, we'll have recessions, we'll have bad years. So these are just some things to think about. Okay. Next thing is another chart. I think I'm going to skip over this one for the sake of time, but feel free to pause and look at this as well. It's just another way of interpreting the data. We're looking at annual interest rate again, 9%. For $10,000 savings. Actually, I think it's the same chart. Yeah, so we're definitely going to skip over that. Okay, Benzinga. This magazine, this online magazine, I also thought did a good job because it quoted Munger, right? And so I thought he said it well. He said the first 100,000 is very hard, but you have to do it, right? Especially if you want to build your $1 million net worth. I don't care what you have to do. It means walking everywhere and not eating anything. So this is the small little stress that wasn't purchased with a coupon. Find a way to get your hands on $100,000. After that, you can ease off the gas a little bit. So again, just what I was saying earlier, but also actually supported by a very famous investment figure. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to share with you is my map system. I want you to follow the map. Literally, this gives you your destination from point A, if I can actually write correctly, point A to point B. So this is the map system. In order to drive anywhere in the world, right, you want to find and follow a map. And at least I do, because I would get lost otherwise. So the map system, it's an acronym and it stands for the following things. M means minimize, A means accelerate, and P means protect. So we are minimizing, we're accelerating, and we're protecting. Let's jump into the details. So for minimize, we want to kill high interest debt first, especially credit card debt. That's what I'm talking about. It is literally an anchor that slows you down and will very likely prevent you from reaching your $100,000 goal. You want to cut ruthlessly on what you don't care about. So we're going back to Munger's thoughts, right? So you want to walk everywhere. You want to buy stuff with a coupon. You really want to be frugal here to get you to your first 100K. You want to free up monthly cash flow to save your first $100,000 goal. That's the goal, right? M, minimize. Minimize expenses. A, accelerate. Learn a skill to earn more. This will get you raises. It will get you a better job potentially. It will get you into freelancing, right? So maybe you can start your own company, whether that's on, I don't know, what is it called? Shopify or Etsy or something else. If you want to learn more about my additional income streams, check out my other videos on that. You want to funnel every extra dollar straight into your 100K fund. And by fund, I mean this would be your investment fund, right? So you're investing in the S&P 500 or things like that, like ETFs like that or index funds. You want to avoid low value time drains. So this here is something called an opportunity cost. And I see this happen quite a bit. So a lot of people are like, oh my goodness, I want to earn $3 and I'm going to take a survey. Okay, so let's say they take a survey and the survey takes, 30 minutes of their time. So that means, they're worth $6 an hour, technically, if they do this survey, $3 for 30 minutes. That's actually not that much, right? Now look at what your job actually pays you. Chances are it's probably paying you more than $6 an hour. That I would call a low value time drain. Plus, it also has an opportunity cost. Like, what else could you have done in those 30 minutes? Could you have increased your skill, right? Going back to point number one here. If you in those 30 minutes, could you have actually learned a new skill? Or could you have started learning a new skill that could have then given you a higher ROI or higher return on investment, the investment being your time. So make sure you do avoid those low value time drains. I see them a lot, and you just kind of got to judge it for yourself. And then finally, P is for protect. You want to build a 3 to 6 month emergency savings fund. This protects you from gathering more high interest debt for credit cards for like unforeseen expenses. You want to automate all your paychecks. So that means you get your paycheck. The first thing it goes to is not to pay off your credit card, not to do anything else. It actually, part of it, a small part of it goes into your savings. It goes to your investing. It goes to then pay off any debt, right? Any high interest debt. And then you also want to make sure you have some guilt-free spending. For high interest debt, I will just say this, it depends on what the interest rate is and it depends on how much the debt is. It also depends on what your comfort level is. So if you're someone who's a little bit more conservative and you prefer to pay off your debt first and then save and invest, you can certainly do that, right? It really does depend on the individual. So take this all with a grain of salt. You got to check in with yourself first before you pursue certain pathways. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. Make sure you understand who you are, how you feel comfortable, and then you can kind of automate your paycheck, either routing the money to your credit card to pay off high interest debt or to saving and investing. That really depends on you. And then finally, use this December 1% rule. Increase investments 1% minimum each year. So, each year you want to increase the amount of money that you put into your savings and investment accounts, ideally by 5% or 10% per year, right? That would be the ideal amount. So before I jump into this simple low-cost investing, again, if you think this is interesting and if you like what you're hearing, I would, again, as always, really appreciate if you like and subscribe to my channel. I would really love that. Okay, so let's talk about simple and low-cost investing. This is not news, but I do want to share that most active managers, they lose to index funds when we're looking net of fees. Net of fees is when you're looking at the actual return minus the fees, and then that equals net of fees. Okay, so that's net of fees. So when you're looking at a return, let's say private managers, they actually give you like a 10% or 15% return, but they cost you like 6%. So that's actually a 9% return, which is essentially the same thing you would get at a Vanguard index fund in the S&P 500. So they're the same. Now you take on more risk typically also with active managers. You have less risk typically with passive income or passive index funds. So take it with a grain of salt. Active managers can outperform index funds though too, right? So they take more risks, so there can be a little bit more outperformance. Is that worth it to you? You got to know that yourself. The target date funds is another thing I wanted to share. Target date funds, they're kind of a set it and forget it, auto adjust type of fund with age, because as you age and as you get closer to retirement, you don't want to have 100% of your money in stocks, right? Because that would be too risky. If you retire and it's all in stocks and we're in a recession, you have to sell to live your life, you're going to lock in the losses, and we don't want that. So target date funds, they auto adjust, and that means there's no additional fees to pay for active managers. It's just automated, and it will also help you not have to worry about like all these different things as well. So active versus index fund returns over the past 10 years. I wanted to share this also. So there's different categories, like for example, US large cap blend, US mid cap, small cap. Let's just focus on the large cap because generally this is what the S&P 500 is known for. So you can see the blue color is active and the yellow color is index funds. So this here is, the calculations are as of June 2020. So it's relatively recent, which means the data can be, possibly applied still to the modern day, but at least it's good to know. And as you can see, at least for US large cap stocks, the index funds have outperformed by almost 2 percentage points the active funds, which is quite a bit, right? In general, they do seem to be in line, if not index funds being a little bit better, right? So you can see they generally it seems like index funds outperform the US-based companies, but then foreign large cap, it seems like there's a 1 percentage point increase for active funds. So it seems like things that aren't necessarily domestic, so things outside of the US, maybe active funds perform a little bit better. Just something to know. Reducing fees is critical. I thought this chart just shows how important it is to reduce the amount of fees that you pay. So in other words, using index funds over active managers. So a difference of 2.25% in fees can result in the loss of up to 2/3 of the value of your retirement account over the long term. So like about 50 years in this chart, okay? So that's a lot, like 2/3. It can lose 2/3 of the value of your retirement account over 50 years. So based on $50,000 in investment with a 7% annual return, this graph shows this theoretical result. So if you look over 50 years, if you have 3% fees, so this here's the fees, you're ending up at, I don't know, what is this, like 300,000 maybe? And then here at 1.75% total fees, you're ending up at like maybe 600,000. And then at 75% in total fees, you're ending up at about $1 million, right? So it's a huge difference. It really is a huge difference in fees. So that's why, again, even though maybe active managers offer more return in the long run, it's important to like consider what the net of fee return is. So what is the return after you take out the fees? And this here is an overview of what a target date fund does in case you're not familiar with this term. So this is the allocation. So what percent of your money is invested in stocks versus bonds? And this here is the years to target date. And the target date typically means your retirement. And so we have years beyond retirement. So this here is the target date. This here means that you are retiring. Okay. And so we have red is US stocks. So you can see that, you know, years to target date, the stock allocation is decreasing automatically. And then the bond allocation, which should be this dark blue, is actually increasing, right? So the spread is increasing. The amount, like the gap, is increasing, which means there's more conservative assets in your retirement account versus aggressive assets. All right, cool. So the 4 things I want you to avoid before we head off and I say goodbye. The 4 wealth killers, getting rich quick schemes. Guys, oftentimes, if it's too good to be true, it's probably not true. So meme stocks, unplanned Airbnb, unplanned Airbnb stays, like trying to rent out your place for Airbnb stuff, or like getting a roommate or renting out a house or whatever. That can be very, very taxing. I tried that as well, doing rental setup, and it's just tough. It's draining. Meme stocks, they can be tough and draining. Yeah, there's like a 1 or 5% chance for you to actually get rich, but the chances of that happening, because there's so many people trying to participate in these get rich quick schemes, probably not going to happen. Toxic frugality, you do not want to deprive yourself, okay? Like, make sure you eat, make sure you also live a somewhat okay life. Again, not that I want to buy into the whole YOLO, you only live once type of movement, but don't deprive yourself. That's not the point of life either. I missed my chance, so don't think of it like, oh, I missed my chance 2 years ago, so I'm just not going to act on it. That's a mindset I've encountered too, where people think, okay, I missed it, I'm just done. I'm not going to do anything. No, don't do that. Start today. It's so important. And then optimization spiral. So chasing tiny little gains distracts from big wins. So I'm thinking of the phrase, I think it was Ben Franklin who said it, don't be penny wise and pound foolish, right? So it's important to go back to the idea of what is an opportunity cost and where do you actually want to invest your time for high ROI activities. Okay, so that's always how I think about it. What are high ROI activities and where can I invest my time best? So your first $100,000 blueprint, as a quick recap: kill high interest debt, follow my MAP system, and minimize, accelerate, and protect. Build an emergency fund, automate your investing, and apply the December 1% rule. As always, make sure you start building wealth now. If you found this video helpful, again, I would really appreciate it if you like and if you share this video with others, especially if you learned something new. If you subscribe to my YouTube channel, that's @the_, don't forget the _MMW, and then join my newsletter for more exclusive tips and insights, which is in the link below. Your bank accounts will thank you later. Thanks, everyone.